So let's start with the first step, because before you do anything else, you've got to recognize the pattern, not the excuse. This is where most people get stuck, because the truth is, narcissists don't walk around with labels on their forehead saying, "Hey, I'm the one who's about to drain your energy, break your confidence, and twist reality." They come across as charming. They come across as confident. Sometimes they come across as the person who understands you better than anyone else. And it's easy to mistake that charm for depth, or that confidence for strength. But you've got to look deeper, because what's really happening is a cycle, a pattern that repeats itself over and over. And if you keep buying into the excuse instead of seeing the pattern, you'll keep playing their game without even knowing it. Think about it. How many times have you told yourself, "Oh, they're just under a lot of stress right now," or "That's just the way they are, they don't really mean it"? You excuse the criticism, you excuse the manipulation, you excuse the lack of empathy because you don't want to believe it's intentional. And sometimes it isn't intentional, but the effect on you is the same. The truth is, stress doesn't justify cruelty. Personality doesn't excuse disrespect. And just because someone has a story doesn't mean you need to carry their weight on your back while they crush your spirit. Recognizing the pattern means you stop focusing on the why behind their behavior and start paying attention to the what. Don't get caught up in the story they tell you, or the one you tell yourself about them. Watch what they do. Do they constantly shift the blame onto you? Do they twist your words to make you question your own memory? Do they make you feel like you're walking on eggshells, careful not to set them off? That's the pattern. That's not love. That's not respect. That's control. And I want you to hear this clearly. Recognizing the pattern doesn't mean you're judging them. It means you're protecting yourself. You're saying, "I'm not going to live in denial anymore." And denial is powerful because it feels safe. It keeps you from facing the pain. But denial also keeps you stuck. You can't change what you refuse to name. Here's where people get tripped up. They confuse compassion with acceptance. Compassion says, "I can understand you had a tough past. I can understand life hasn't been easy for you. That's fine." But acceptance says, "And because of that, I'll let you keep hurting me." That's not fine. That's the excuse. And when you buy into that excuse, you're giving them permission to keep running the same cycle again and again. I know some of you are thinking, but maybe they'll change. Maybe if I'm just patient enough, if I show them enough love, if I keep giving them the benefit of the doubt, maybe one day they'll get it. And that hope is exactly what they thrive on. It's like handing them the keys to your self-worth and asking them to drive. But you've got to ask yourself, how many times have you waited for that change and it never came? How many times have you been left disappointed, drained, and questioning yourself? Recognizing the pattern is about cutting through the noise, the excuses, and the endless cycle of hope and disappointment. It's about telling yourself the truth, even when it hurts. Because the truth sets you free, even if it breaks your heart first. And freedom starts with clarity. Once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. And that's the power. That's the beginning of your strength. Because once you see it, you stop wasting your energy trying to fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed. You stop explaining away behavior that's unacceptable. You stop making excuses for people who never stop making excuses for themselves. This isn't about being cruel, and it isn't about revenge. It's about honesty. Honesty with yourself. And when you can finally look at their behavior and say, "This is not love, this is not respect, this is manipulation," that's when you begin to take your power back. So the very first step is this: stop searching for the excuse and start recognizing the pattern. Because the moment you do, you stop asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" And you start asking, "Why am I allowing it?" And that question, that one shift, is where everything changes. Once you recognize the pattern, the next step is where most people hesitate. It's where you stop being nice, stop being overly accommodating, and start setting boundaries without apology. And I know that word, boundaries, can feel intimidating because for so long you've been trained to think that saying no is rude, that pushing back makes you selfish, that protecting your energy somehow makes you unkind. But let me tell you something, boundaries are not walls, they are doors. They don't shut people out, they simply control what you allow in. Here's the trap: narcissists thrive on your hesitation. They count on your politeness, on your desire to keep the peace, on your willingness to bend over backwards just so you don't come off as mean. That's how they gain control. Every time you give in, every time you explain yourself one more time, every time you sacrifice your comfort just to keep them comfortable, you're sending a silent signal that says, you can cross this line and I'll just move it further back. Boundaries, on the other hand, send a different message. This is where the line is, and it will not move no matter how much you push. And yes, that feels uncomfortable at first, especially if you've been conditioned to believe your worth comes from keeping others happy. But the truth is, the people who truly care about you will respect your limits. The ones who don't, they're the ones who benefit from you having none. Think about how many times you've over-explained a simple decision. You didn't just say, I can't make it tonight. You said, I'm so sorry. I'm really tired. I had a long day. I feel guilty. But maybe we can reschedule. And while you're just trying to be considerate, what you're really doing is giving the other person more material to twist, more opportunities to guilt, trip you into backing down. But when you set a boundary with clarity and confidence, you remove the loopholes. You take away their ability to manipulate the gray area. The most powerful boundaries are short, clear, and without apology. I'm not available. That doesn't work for me. I'm not discussing this any further. Notice what's missing: justification. You don't owe someone a 10-page essay for saying no, because every time you over-explain, you're actually giving them permission to argue with you. Now, I know what you're thinking, but they'll get angry. Of course they will. That's the test. Narcissists don't like boundaries because boundaries mean they're losing control. Expect the pushback. Expect the guilt trips, the accusations, the silent treatment. That resistance isn't proof that you're doing something wrong. It's proof that you're doing something right. Here's where your strength is tested. When you set that boundary and they push back, don't waver. Don't soften your words just to make them comfortable. Because the second you do, they learn that your limits are negotiable. And when your limits are negotiable, they're not limits at all. What most people don't realize is that boundaries aren't about controlling the other person. They're about controlling yourself. You can't stop someone from being manipulative, but you can stop giving them access to the parts of you they abuse. You can't make someone respect you, but you can refuse to stay in conversations or situations where respect is absent. Boundaries aren't about changing them, they're about protecting you. And yes, it will feel strange in the beginning. If you've spent your whole life being the nice one, the agreeable one, the peacekeeper, then suddenly saying no will feel like breaking the rules. But that's because the rules you've been following weren't written for your well-being. They were written to keep you small, to keep you compliant, to keep you under control. Every time you set a boundary without apology, you're retraining yourself. You're teaching yourself that your voice matters, that your needs matter, that your comfort matters just as much as anyone else's. And with each boundary you hold, your confidence grows stronger. You stop walking on eggshells and start walking in truth. So don't confuse being firm with being unkind. Boundaries are an act of respect for yourself and even for others. They clarify where you end and where someone else begins. They protect your peace, your time, your energy. And you don't have to justify them to anyone who refuses to respect them. Because here's the reality: narcissists don't respect nice. They exploit it. But they do notice strength. And the moment you stop apologizing for protecting yourself, you send a message they cannot ignore. So the next time you feel that instinct to over-explain, to bend, to back down just to avoid conflict, remind yourself of this: every boundary you set is not a rejection of them, it's a declaration of you. And that declaration is where freedom begins. When you've recognized the pattern and you've started setting boundaries, there's another layer you've got to deal with. And it's probably the hardest one, because it's not about them at all. It's about you. It's about detaching from their approval. See, this is where so many people get stuck in the cycle, because even when they know the behavior is toxic, even when they've drawn the line, deep down they're still waiting for that one thing that never comes: validation. It sounds like this: if they could just admit they were wrong, if they could just recognize my effort, if they could just say sorry in a way that feels real. And you hold on to that hope like it's oxygen. But here's the truth: narcissists don't give you genuine approval. They dangle it like a carrot. They hand it out in little crumbs when it benefits them, and they take it away the second you stop playing by their rules. That's not approval. That's control dressed up as acceptance. Think about how much energy you've spent chasing that approval. How many times you've bent yourself out of shape trying to meet impossible standards. How many times you've silenced your own needs, your own voice, just to keep their validation in reach. And even when you did everything right, even when you gave your all, did it ever feel like enough? No. Because with a narcissist, it never will be. And here's why: their approval isn't about you. It never was. It's about maintaining the upper hand. If they admit you're worthy, if they consistently affirm you, then they lose control. And control is what they live on. So the sooner you stop waiting for their stamp of approval, the sooner you start living from your own. Detaching from their approval doesn't mean you don't care. It means you stop tying your worth to their reactions. It means you stop reading their moods like weather reports to decide how you should feel today. It means you stop thinking their silence means you're unlovable, or their anger means you're the problem. You are not a puppet, and your strings don't belong in their hands. So how do you detach? You shift the source. Instead of looking outward for approval, you start looking inward. You remind yourself that your value isn't up for negotiation. It doesn't rise when they praise you, and it doesn't fall when they criticize you. It's steady. It's constant. And it comes from the fact that you're a human being worthy of respect and love, regardless of who does or doesn't see it. This isn't easy, because if you've spent years, maybe even your whole life, chasing their recognition, it feels like second nature. You almost don't know who you are without that chase. But that's why detaching is so powerful. Because the minute you stop needing their approval, you start reclaiming yourself. You start making decisions not based on, will they be happy with this? But, is this right for me? You stop walking into a room hoping they'll notice you, and you start noticing yourself. One of the strongest shifts you can make is redefining what success feels like. Success isn't getting their nod of approval. Success is keeping your peace when they try to provoke you. Success is holding your boundary when they try to push past it. Success is walking away from the chaos without needing to explain why. Every time you choose your peace over their approval, you win. And yes, there will be moments when it stings. When you set a boundary and they withdraw even more. When you stop chasing and suddenly feel the silence. When you realize the apology you've been waiting for is never coming. That hurts. But in that silence is also freedom. Because when you no longer need their validation, they no longer have leverage over you. Detaching doesn't make you cold, it makes you clear. It clears out the noise of trying to prove yourself to someone who will never see it, so you can finally hear your own voice. And that voice, the one inside you, it's the only approval you've ever truly needed. So let this settle in: their approval was never the prize. Your freedom is. And the moment you stop tying your worth to their recognition, you untie yourself from their control. And that is the moment you finally step into your power. Now, Once you've recognized the pattern and stopped chasing their approval, there's something else you have to understand if you really want your freedom back. You cannot control a narcissist. You can't control how they think, how they react, or how they behave. And the harder you try, the more frustrated you'll become, because it's like pouring all your energy into a bottomless pit. That's the trap. The more you try to change them, the deeper you sink. But here's the shift that changes everything. You don't need to control them. You only need to control the interaction. And that's a completely different mindset. It's not about fixing who they are. It's about choosing how you show up when they try to pull you into their chaos. Because what they thrive on is reaction. They want the argument. They want the defensiveness. They want the explosion. It fuels them. If you've ever noticed, the more emotional you get, the calmer they seem. That's not an accident. That's them feeding off the control they gain when they can get you spinning. So your power lies in refusing to play that game. Keep your words short. Keep your tone calm. Keep your emotions in check. It's not about being cold. It's about being unshakable. The moment you stop handing them the reaction they're looking for, the dynamic changes. They'll still push, of course. They'll still try to bait you, twist your words, throw out the accusations. But you don't have to step into the ring just because they throw down the glove. Here's the image I want you to hold on to. Imagine you're standing in a storm. The wind is howling, the rain is pouring, lightning is cracking across the sky. That storm is the narcissist. And your power, is not trying to stop the storm. You can't. But you can carry an umbrella, you can put on a raincoat, you can walk away from standing in the middle of it. The storm doesn't stop existing, but it stops consuming you. In practice, that means setting the tone of the interaction. You don't argue. You don't match their intensity. You don't let them drag you into explaining yourself over and over. When they accuse, you don't defend, you redirect. When they provoke, you don't bite. You disengage. And the most powerful move of all, silence, walking away, refusing to fuel the fire. Now, some people hear this and say, but if I don't defend myself, they'll think they're right. Let them think they're right. You don't need to win the argument. You need to win your peace. And peace doesn't come from convincing someone who's committed to misunderstanding you. Peace comes from deciding you don't owe them that fight. This is where self-control becomes your weapon. Not control over them, but control over yourself. Control over your words, your reactions, your time, your energy. Because when you stay steady, when you refuse to give them the emotional chaos they crave, you cut off their supply. And at first, they'll hate it. They'll try harder. They'll push louder. But over time, your steadiness becomes your shield. Think about how powerful it feels to walk out of a conversation without feeling drained. To know you didn't rise to the bait. To know you kept your dignity when they tried to strip it away. That's not weakness. That's strength. And the more you practice it, the stronger you get. And here's what's important. You're not doing this to manipulate them. You're not trying to win. You're doing this to protect yourself. Because if you live your life waiting for a narcissist to calm down, to apologize, to finally treat you fairly, you'll be waiting forever. But if you shift your focus from them to you, from controlling them to controlling your interaction, you stop waiting. You start living. The real freedom isn't in getting them to change. It's in realizing you don't need them to. You only need to control how much of yourself you give them. And once you learn that, once you start keeping your interactions calm, short, and free of emotional fuel, you'll notice something powerful. The storm doesn't scare you anymore. Because you know you can walk through it without losing yourself. So stop trying to control the person. Control the interaction. Because in the end, their chaos only matters if you let it inside. And the moment you stop letting it in, you've already won. By now you've started to see it. Recognizing the pattern, setting the boundaries, refusing to chase approval, and keeping control of the interaction. But there's another piece to this puzzle that people often overlook, And it's the one that makes all the difference in whether you actually find freedom or just survive in survival mode. You have to prioritize your mental and emotional health. Because if you don't, all of this, the boundaries, the calm responses, the detachment, becomes impossible to maintain. You can't fight a war on an empty tank. The truth is, being around a narcissist is exhausting. It's not just the arguments. It's the constant tension, the second guessing, the walking on eggshells, the feeling that no matter what you do, it won't be enough. That wears you down over time. It chips away at your confidence, at your peace, at your sense of self. And the more drained you are, the easier it is for them to pull you back into the cycle. That's why prioritizing your mental health isn't optional. It's essential. It means making a conscious decision every single day to protect your energy, to rebuild your confidence, to give yourself the care they never will. And for some of you, that starts with something as simple as taking a breath, a pause, stepping out of the chaos long enough to remember who you are when you're not being picked apart or manipulated. Maybe that looks like journaling, putting your thoughts on paper so you can see clearly what's happening instead of getting lost in the fog they create. Maybe it looks like therapy or coaching, having someone objective remind you that you're not crazy, you're not too sensitive, you're not overreacting, you're just dealing with someone who refuses to take responsibility. Maybe it looks like exercise or prayer or meditation or time with people who actually value you for you. Whatever it is, you need it. Not once in a while, but consistently. Because here's the thing, when you don't take care of yourself, you start slipping back into their control without even realizing it. You start reacting out of exhaustion instead of clarity. You start letting their voice drown out your own. And that's exactly where they want you, tired, confused, dependent. But when you're filled up, when you've done the work to strengthen yourself from the inside out, you see things differently, you respond differently, you stop handing them the keys to your peace. And I want to say this clearly, taking care of yourself is not selfish. That's another lie narcissists love to spin. They'll make you feel guilty for setting boundaries, for saying no, for taking time to recharge. They'll paint you as cold, ungrateful, even cruel. But that's just projection. Because the truth is, you cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot build a healthy life while running on fumes. Think about it. When you're well, rested, when your mind is clear, when your heart is steady, don't you notice how much stronger you are in those interactions? Don't you notice how much less their words get to you, how much easier it is to walk away, how much harder it is for them to shake you? That's not a coincidence. That's the result of you investing in yourself instead of constantly investing in them. And here's the most empowering part. When you start prioritizing your mental and emotional health, you stop living in reaction to them and start living in alignment with you. Your choices aren't about dodging their moods anymore. They're about protecting your peace. Your decisions aren't about keeping them happy anymore. They're about keeping you whole. And that shift is where real freedom begins. So yes, set the boundary. Yes, control the interaction. But don't forget to fill yourself back up. Because strength isn't built in the battle. It's built in the recovery. It's built in those quiet moments where you remind yourself that your needs matter, your voice matters, your well-being matters. And when you start living like you believe that, everything changes. So if you take nothing else from this point, take this: you cannot win this fight by being drained, exhausted, and empty. You win it by being grounded, clear, and whole. And that means making your mental and emotional health your number one priority. Because the stronger you are on the inside, the less power they will ever have over you. We've walked through the steps, recognizing the pattern, setting the boundary, detaching from approval, controlling the interaction, protecting your mental health. But all of that builds to this final piece: stop choosing nice and start choosing strong. Because here's the truth: you've been told your whole life that being nice is what makes you a good person, that being agreeable, Being accommodating, being selfless is what earns you love and respect. But with a narcissist, nice is not respected. Nice is exploited. Think about it. Every time you've softened your words to avoid conflict, every time you've said yes when your gut screamed no, every time you've apologized just to smooth things over, what happened? Did they thank you for your kindness? Did they appreciate your effort? No. They took it as an invitation to take more, because nice to a narcissist doesn't look like kindness. It looks like weakness. But strength is different. Strength doesn't mean being cruel. It doesn't mean raising your voice or lashing out or trying to hurt them back. Strength means standing firm in who you are, even when they push against it. Strength means saying no without guilt, walking away without apology, and protecting your peace without hesitation. And here's the shift. You can still be kind without being nice in the way they want. Kindness comes from love. Niceness, in this context, comes from fear. Fear of rejection, fear of conflict, fear of not being enough. And when you live from fear, you hand them the control. But when you live from strength, fear doesn't drive your choices anymore. Self-respect does. This is where you start to rewrite your story. Instead of saying, I'll stay quiet so they don't get upset, you say, I'll speak up because my voice matters. Instead of thinking, I'll give in so they'll like me, you say, if they don't respect me, they don't deserve me. Instead of settling for crumbs of validation, you decide you'll rather stand strong and alone than bend yourself into pieces just to keep someone else comfortable. It's not easy. That urge to be nice, to please, to smooth over, it's wired deep, especially if you've spent years trying to manage their moods. So the first few times you choose strength, it will feel unnatural. It will feel like you're breaking the rules. And in a way you are. You're breaking the rules that kept you small. You're breaking the rules that told you your worth comes from keeping others happy while you burn yourself out in the process. The more you practice strength, the more natural it becomes. You'll start to notice how much lighter you feel when you stop apologizing for existing. You'll notice how much calmer you feel when you stop explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you. And you'll notice how much stronger you feel when you start honoring your own needs instead of constantly sacrificing them for someone else's comfort. And here's the powerful part. Strength changes the whole dynamic. Because when you're strong, when you're clear, when you stop handing over your power, the narcissist has nothing left to grab onto. They can rant, they can guilt trip, they can try to bait you, but it doesn't land the same way anymore. They might still be loud, but inside, you're steady. They might still push, but inside, you're anchored. And that's steadiness. That's freedom. So let me leave you with this. You've tried being nice. You've tried giving more, bending more, explaining more. And where has it gotten you? Tired, hurt, empty. Now it's time to try something different. Stop being nice to a narcissist. Start being strong. Strong in your boundaries, strong in your self-worth, strong in your decision to protect your peace no matter what storm they bring. Because in the end, niceness won't save you. Strength will. And once you choose strength, you'll never go back.